at Orca Books in Olympia, Washington, and we're going to be talking with Mark Robijn, the incredible author of the Johnny Apocalypse series. My name is Jennifer DiMarco, and I work with the non-profit publishing house Blue Forge Press, and we are so thrilled to be speaking with Mark today because Mark has done something that I wasn't actually 100% certain could be done in this day and age. He has created a series that young adults actually want to read, which means they have to put down all those devices we've taught them it's okay to live on. Mark, tell us a little bit about the series just in general. Tell us as if we've never heard of it before.
Okay. This series is about Johnny Apocalypse. He lives 100 years after nuclear war in an old mall with his friends and family. It's all about their adventures as they try to rebuild the world, and the evil gang that lives in the wasteland whose leader, Ripper, becomes Johnny's nemesis, and just all the creatures and dangers and adventures they have in like a post-apocalyptic world.
How old is Johnny when the series begins?
He's 15 years old, and he has his three friends are also about 15 or 16. So it's a group of four teens and their adventures.
And I know that this is book one.
Uh-huh.
You have written books 2, 3, and 4?
And 5.
And 5.
Right, yeah. The first adventure starts in book 1 and goes through books 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And the 4 and 5 are the start of a new adventure that actually will continue and end in book 6, which is still to be written.
So many books to come.
Okay.
You don't plan to wrap things up in book 6?
No, there's a whole world for Johnny to explore.
Yeah. In book 1, you say he starts at 14. 15, I'm sorry. See,
okay.
That's why I have Mark here, guys. Okay, so he's 15 years old, and then you say book 1, 2, and 3 are the first adventure. Does he age during that time?
He ages a little bit over the time. It's not,
but not like a jump in years.
It's not like
that.
No. It's pretty much a pretty linear adventure that goes through maybe 2 or 3, 6 months or something.
Fantastic.
Through that adventure. So.
A lot of authors do that where they'll skip ahead, 5 years or more, and I can find that can be very jarring sometimes for the reader.
No, this pretty much continues the whole adventure right from where he starts.
Yeah.
All the way into 4 and 5 are just continuing his adventures. So he just starts a new adventure in 4 and 5.
I love that. Talk to me a little bit more about Johnny as a character. Okay. We so rarely get, you guys might be thinking, what do you mean we so rarely get characters that are true singular protagonists? And I know that he has his gang and he has, close friends, but he really does drive the series forward. Of course, we had Harry Potter, yes. But by and large, ensemble series are becoming more and more popular. Talk to me about Johnny and how the series kind of rests on his shoulders. Where was your inspiration from Johnny? Where did it come from?
Well, I've read science fiction books and like horror books ever since I was young. And Johnny, I guess, is kind of like they say, most authors, their main character is who they'd want to be. Mm-hmm. So I would think Johnny is kind of like that young hero that just is very believes in right and wrong, and believes in justice, and believes in making sure that everything that he has goals that move forward to create a world for him and his tribe. That so he cares about everybody in his tribe, and he cares about his people, and he's kind of like because he's the type of character he is. He's sympathetic, he's empathetic. The tribe all look to him instead of the real leader of the tribe for leadership, and he takes that role on because that's the kind of character he is. Yeah. Just a character who cares about people and has the courage and the just stubbornness to go ahead and be that character, and take over that role even though he hasn't been given it. And so he's kind of like a hero who when somebody does something wrong, he has a real sense of justice, and of wanting that wrong to be righted. And that's kind of what makes him such a character that people turn to. And
he has an incredible moral compass,
right?
Throughout the series,
and he takes, when something's wrong, he takes it very, to heart, and wants to see it fixed. Yeah. And he's kind of a lot like his mentor, Mr. Wizard, in the books, in that Mr. Wizard is also kind of instilled that in Johnny by teaching him about the it's 100 years after nuclear war, so he's kind of taught Johnny about the how the country was before with democracy and with freedom and with liberty, and he's kind of taught Johnny about those things, and so Johnny is kind of like espoused those things himself as well, you know.
Yeah.
And so there's a hope in both Johnny and Mr. Wizard to restore that freedom and
those
that
best ideals.
That democracy that we had before that's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think one of the things that I've always loved about Mark's series is that he was trying to tackle two things that I had never seen done before. One is this kind of a science fiction series driven by that moral compass and a character that has just intrinsically this really foundational moral compass. He is really drawn by that. It guides his path forward. Ethics and morals actually mean something to him. And the other thing was this idea of rebuilding society on the ideas of our better nature. To try, instead of trying to live in chaos or continue to live in kind of anarchy and being splintered, this idea of can we rebuild, but actually in a way that we stand up to all of these incredible ideals. Is it possible?
Right.
And action, adventure, danger, risk, loyalty, all of the big elements are in Johnny's life, in his world, and it's all kind of thrust upon him very early on. You waste no time.
And there's also this feeling of that all teens have, like nobody listens to them, and they see something that's wrong and see something that needs to be fixed, but nobody's listening or cares what they think, and there's that feeling of trying to set things right when nobody's really listening to you or thinks your ideas are important.
Yeah.
But facing that and pushing forward anyway, to get them fixed, things fixed. So
I think it's kind of cool that today we're talking at Orca Books in front of their parenting section, and one of the books that I literally pulled off the shelf in one of these past Saturdays was a book literally about giving our children autonomy and trusting what they're saying, to actually remember that they are human beings in their own right. They have their own ideas, they have their own perspectives, and they are going to see things differently from us. And in some ways, in many instances, those perspectives are incredibly valuable. And if we can listen a little bit more, we can actually move forward in a more positive way.
Right.
I think that I love that idea is timeless. And Johnny really immortalizes that idea in a way. Okay, so I have some little questions here.
Sure.
Now, I know that you and I have talked before on Speak and on Fair Play, two shows that you guys can definitely find. Mark has amazing interviews there about you drawing on that basis of classic science fiction and loving that classic science fiction. You've definitely brought that vibe. You've married the dystopian, which wasn't even a genre when I was first writing 35 years ago, this dystopian genre, and you've married it with classic sci-fi. What were some of the classic sci-fi titles growing up that you loved?
Well, one of the books that I loved most of all was Skywriters of Pern, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. And no, I'm sorry, Skywriters of Callisto.
Ah, okay.
And,
it's the Dragon Riders of Pern.
Yeah. Skywriters of Callisto and the Black Pirates of Callisto and the John Dar of Callisto.
Okay.
They're a really fun old series about a character who goes and finds this special obelisk, and it sends him to one of the moons of Jupiter and all his adventures there. And that was one of my favorite genres, and it was back, in the days of back before all the science was there. So it was back when you could just make up anything,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody really knew what was on, the
Right.
moons of Jupiter, and so you could just use your imagination,
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite books that really inspired me when I was younger.
One of the topics that we've talked about a couple of Saturdays now in a row is fiction writers, how much research do you do? Would you talk to us a little bit about your writing process in general? Like, do you have a set schedule? Do you research?
I did. Before I started the Johnny Apocalypse series, I started researching what life would be like 100 years after nuclear war, what kind of things they would have to face, whether there would even be, a chance to live, or how bad the radiation would be by that time. And I said it 100 years because that is when, as I understood from my research, by that time the radiation would have started to die down enough that people could start to live again, And that's kind of why, and up to that point, Johnny and his family, they live in an old mall, and they're just kind of like locked in there, and they're afraid to go out. And Johnny's actually, that's one of the things Johnny does, is he tries to convince his tribe that, hey, it's safe to go outside now, we can start living again. But because of the leader of his tribe, who is kind of like a miser, a dictator who doesn't want to lose control, he's trying to keep the people in this old abandoned mall, try to keep them under fear. And that's one of the things Johnny really does, is try to show them they don't have to live by that anymore. And he comes up against this leader, who is also, he considers kind of an evil person who is controlling people. And that's one of the things where, as a young kid, nobody listens to him. But he's has a strong sense of right and wrong, and so he wants to see justice prevail and see his people be able to escape their prison, pretty much. So.
Self-imposed, almost.
Right.
Self-imposed
Self-imposed superstitions and fears.
That
they're afraid to even go out. And he just cares about his people and doesn't want to see them just continue to sit there and like wither in this dark environment. So.
Over the course of writing the first books in the series, beyond researching post-apocalyptic life and post-apocalyptic America, what were some other things that you found you had to research as an author?
I think different weapons, different things they might use. And just actually had to research the cities where actually it was going to take place. And all the different buildings and structures in each of those cities that they were going to be visiting and living in.
I love that.
So that was part of it.
Now, you travel for work sometimes. Have you ever traveled for work, been in a city and gone like, oh, I could do something with Johnny here?
Not really. I have been to some of the cities that I wrote about, but really, I pretty much have just the cities where he's actually at. I just research them online and
That the vital
but
importance
of course,
research.
every place I've been, it would be cool for Johnny to go to. But you have to start somewhere,
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to us about your writing process. Do you write on certain days? Do you write for a certain number of hours?
I'm probably not as good as this as I should be, but I generally, when I have a project, I try to sit down. I actually try to go somewhere other than my house and sit down for like 2-3 hours and write, because if I stay in my house, I always find something else to do.
Yeah. Oh, I love
so
that.
I usually
That's
go to
very
like
honest.
I go to like the library, like a college library, and I just sit in a chair with my computer and I just sit there and write for an hour, as long as I can stay there without getting totally saying, okay, I gotta leave now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Or I go to a Starbucks or something sometimes too, if the library isn't open, and I just sit there and concentrate on writing the books.
And you can get so into the story that you do, or do you wear headphones?
Sometimes it depends on how noisy it is. Usually the college libraries are so quiet you don't have to.
Yeah.
But if you're at a Starbucks, sometimes you have to put in music and put in, because it's just people are talking and stuff. So it all depends on the environment you're in.
But I love that you do. You go and you find yourself your little place, sink your claws in, and just start.
Because that keeps me from thinking about anything else. I just concentrate on the book.
Yeah. Oh, that fan needs to be rebalanced, or that gutter is dripping. I should head out there and take care of that.
Just tons of other things
at
home you'd like to do too.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of keep yourself from being distracted.
Of all of the adventures, all of the scenes, all of the encounters that you've put Johnny in, what is your absolute favorite, one that you love to read, you love to go back to, and what is the one that you found the most difficult to write?
Let's see. I think one of my favorites, I think, is the adventure he has where when he's young he has to fight a tiger, and he's like trying to hide from this tiger, and it finally catches him and runs after him, and he has to escape from it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's kind of a fun scene. There's also I enjoyed the scene where he was fighting in the battle in Washington D.C., where he was fighting all the enemies there, and there was like the leader of that evil group had like a giant bear and all these other creatures that fought against him. And that was a fun battle to fight. And I also enjoyed my scene where they were underneath the subway in Washington D.C. and there was all these strange characters down there that they dealt with. So those were fun. As far as scenes that I had the most struggle with, I can't really think of anything right offhand. It's all kind of like working as you're going through it and stuff.
But it's okay, and actually Mark brings up a really good point. It's that even if you have to really work on a scene, that doesn't make it less than.
Right.
Having to work a little bit harder or revise a scene or come back to a scene days later, that's totally fine. It's all part of the writing process. And you do touch on also a really great point.
Excuse me.
There are fantastic action sequences in the Johnny books. And I know I have said this to you before. Actually, I think I've said this to you before on camera. But that is also rare because so often people say, well, the action sequences, the explosions, the chases, the battle scenes, that's for the movie adaptation. And I'm like, what? What? All of that can be done beautifully on the page.
Right.
You like to write action sequences.
Right. Well, I like to think about thinking about my reader. What are they going to think is so fun and so exciting? And try to bring that to life. What would they think is just a cool scene? And a cool fight. And that's kind of what I try to bring into the book.
Yeah, I like that.
It sounds fun and exciting.
You have the books in the series, yes, but you also have a tabletop card game that is a story deck. So you're actually, and Johnny is playable in that game. So you can play Johnny. What are the other characters you can play?
You can play the other three characters of Johnny's team. His girlfriend Deb, his friend Starbucks, and Starbucks' girlfriend Super are the four main characters.
And you can walk through, I believe it's called Johnny Apocalypse and the Battle
with the Beastmen.
Yeah. And you move through the deck, and with the various characters, you have to meet the challenges as the story unfolds. It's actually a great idea. And if you guys check Mark's website or blueforgegroup.org, you can check the events listing, and you can see where Mark is going to be. He will often give out free Johnny Apocalypse playable character cards with the purchase of any of the Johnny books, which I love, but you have to catch him live, you guys. You have to catch him live. Even though I'd be willing to bet if you purchase a book directly through Mark, through his website, he might be convinced to put a card in there for you guys. All right, let me go back to my questions.
Okay.
See here, what do we ask Mark next? I think, it's funny, one of our things here, it says, dystopian fiction is so popular right now, but why are people drawn to Johnny Apocalypse in particular? I think we've already kind of answered that in a way, because it's that moral compass. It's the fact that this is a universal struggle of a young person that does not feel heard, and he is right, and he should be listened to. The incredible pacing, the action. But Mark, what is it for you? Why do you feel you keep writing them? Why are you not bored? Some writers are like, oh, I have nothing more to say with these characters.
I think that's just it. I have a lot more to say. I think Johnny has just barely touched the surface of the whole country that has fallen, into disrepair because of nuclear war. And he's just on the East Coast right now, and only visited like 2 or 3 cities. There's just so much world out there for him to explore. And each place where I can go, I can come up with some new interesting character or creature that lives in this new area, So I'm a big fan of the Fallout game series,
Yes.
And so it's kind of the same kind of thing. You've got this open slate where everything's been kind of wiped out, and anything can be there that he can come across. So it's just a fun series. It's fun being a writer. I love to just create. and it's just, you got so many places we can create new adventures and new ideas and new things that can happen to Johnny. It's just fun to keep to you don't even know what you're going to create, but you run across all this and think, oh, this is cool, and make him do it. It's really fun.
Talk to me about your process when you're going to start a new book. Do you have like a spark of inspiration, or do you start with, you say, I'm gonna research this location?
But if Johnny goes to a new city, then I'll research the location. If he goes to specific buildings, like in some of the books, he goes to the Smithsonian, some of the old Smithsonian buildings. Yeah. So I research and I actually go on some of the virtual tours of those buildings and find out exactly what the layout of the building is before I actually write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the new city, in the new books, he goes to New York. Mm-hmm. So I did some research before to see what New York looked like, what buildings were there, where characters could go, stuff like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you don't outline, right? Am I remembering properly?
Well, so far, Johnny Apocalypse books kind of follow. They're kind of like one adventure that keeps going. Yeah. So when I get to a certain point, like in the next book, it's a continuation of the adventure in the last one. So I have to just kind of figure out what is going to happen to Johnny next, and what is going to happen in this situation. Yeah. What's and then just kind of that's kind of a figuring, just kind of the fun of the imagination. What's the next thing that's going to happen?
I actually love that. It's almost like you're surprising yourself as you're writing.
Yeah, it's like you invent it as you go along, and that's kind of fun.
When you start a new installment, a new set of chapters,
right?
Do you know roughly, I think I'm going to end this here, even if the adventure's continuing in the next book? Do you know roughly where your final chapter will be?
I kind of not really. I just kind of it's, this adventure ends, and so at the end of this adventure, it's wrapped up, and now we decide what spurs Johnny on to go to the next place, or what happens that makes him want to go someplace else, but I do try to each adventure kind of wrap up that adventure so that there's a satisfactory, fun ending. Yes. But then he moves on to the next adventure.
Talking about Johnny reminds me a little bit of what they are doing with the franchise Quiet Place. I think there's been 3 movies now.
Right, and the last one went back.
And the last one went back, but it was in a completely different location with almost entirely new characters. And I thought, I like that Johnny stays with us, that we're not, because I personally love to follow a protagonist. Right. But I love that we're seeing now, okay, well, what was it like in New York? What was it like in DC? Right. I can imagine Johnny trekking west. What was it like in the Midwest? What was it like in the South, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, the nice thing is you get the main characters, but you also, each time you go to a new place, you get new interesting characters that live there that Johnny meets, and you get to create all kinds of new characters and new situations, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, Ripper, the Beastmen from the game, but also in the books.
Right.
I think that's part of the fun. Not only does he find allies, but all of these adversaries as well. The bears, the tiger.
Sky people.
Oh, we have some fans in the audience. Yes, the sky
that's
people.
That's kind of I'm taking serious scientific license, But I'm just having fun with it, what the nuclear wasteland has done, created. You could create, if you let your imagination run free, you can create all different kinds of different characters and creatures and things. And so it's fun. You can just decide what's he going to run into this time, in this city. What weird creatures are going to be in this city, So it makes it kind of fun.
Can you give us any sneak peek into the next book?
The next book, this book is going to finish the adventure in New York, which is called Nork there.
Okay.
Their language is a little different because it's 100 years after the Nuclear War. But it's pretty much going to be a lot of adventure, a lot of a really big battle, some interesting twists and interesting characters. New characters are going to come up, and just a big monumental kind of fun adventure in New York.
Such a treat, you guys. Mark, you have 2 sections that you wanted to read for us today. Can you tell us a little bit about the first one?
The first one is just the beginning of the book where just explain the world and where Johnny finds himself, and then it starts out with just a little bit about Johnny and about his situation.
All right.
And the other section is just a fun section about where Johnny and his friend Starbucks run into a tiger and how they have to keep that tiger from attacking their tribe, and this is the adventure they have. So.
All right, let's do that.
Okay.
So this is one of the fantastic things about Mark reading is he kind of knows intrinsically. When I ask an author to read for you guys, they'll often say, "Oh no, what do I read?" And I always say, if you can't read your opening pages, then you need to rewrite your opening pages. Because
Right.
remember, when a reader picks up your book, for all of you that are writers out there, and they read those first couple of pages, you want to hook them then. All right, Mark, take it away.
All right. Chapter 1. The elders of the tribe tell tales of the days when war came, and the mushroom monsters filled the sky with fire and smoke. Cities melted into piles of rubble. People turned to ash or into ghost shadows on the walls. Metals melted like hot wax. Almost all who lived during those times died. Then to those who were still left came the sickness. Many developed terrible sores and died. Babies were born deformed or missing arms or legs or eyes, some looking like monsters. Now, 100 years later, only a few survivors remain. Nature has reclaimed the empty gray ribbons where men once drove their metal machines, and the twisted skeletons of steel where men lived. Beasties run in the streets now, rat beasties and dog beasties and other beasties larger and more fierce. Next to one of the abandoned decaying cities stands a group of one-story square buildings huddled together, as if for protection. The buildings are surrounded by a sea of flat, cracked, and broken stone men once called concrete. The concrete is littered with rusted hulks of steel that men once used to call cars. The buildings were once called a shopping mall. Now, the tribe of humans living there in the dark, dirty interior who make it their home call it simply sanctuary. Sanctuary has one long, large area in the middle that goes the length of the whole place. The people call it the main hall. On either side of the main hall are rooms, some small and some big, where the people of the tribe lived. They used to be called stores, but now they're just called dwelling places. Johnny Apocalypse lived on the third floor of a large dwelling place shared by many families of the tribe. It had strange silver letters on it that spelled JCPNNY on the front, though no one could read the ancient text anymore. No one except the wise old man, Mr. Wizard. Johnny's room was in the back of an area of rooms with the letters "Employees Only" on the door. He lived there with his sister, his father, Food Court, his mother, Tivana, his sister, Carney, who was heavy with a wriggler, and his mate, Build-A-Bear. This morning, Johnny heard a voice and woke up, for he trained himself to be awake at the slightest sound. He opened one eye and listened. It was his sister, Carney, whose full name was Carnivals in Town, moaning in her sleep in the next room. Johnny frowned at her, unhappy to be taken out of a nice deep sleep. He sat up anyway and scratched his dirty, short, blonde mop of hair that stuck up in the air with like spikes to knock the bug beasties out. Johnny wore the black leather pants he always wore. A shirt with a picture of some weird creature on it Mr. Wizard told him was a Wookiee, and his leather vest. They were his favorite clothes, ones he found on his secret trips out to the Forbidden City. He slept in them every night. Why take them off? The only things he ever removed were his black leather boots, and that was just because Carney complained he moved his feet and made noise at night. Johnny was tall, big and strong for a boy of only 15 seasons, as big as most men. It was why people often turned to him for help or advice. That and the fact that Johnny was always friendly, willing to help or be kind to anyone. With a cheerful smile and a way of talking that made it seem like he wasn't afraid of anything, people in the tribe almost treated him like he was one of the leaders. Johnny's room was just big enough for his bed and a small table, and to Johnny it always felt like he was in a box, but it had one good thing that Johnny liked. It was next to the outer wall of Sanctuary, with a window. A metal sheet covered the window to keep the bad air out, but against the rules, Johnny had bent the metal up in the corner large enough so that if he tilted his head and opened one eye near the hole, he could see out through the cracked glass beyond. Johnny put his eye to the hole now. The window glass was cracked and covered with grime, but Johnny could still see through it. The red eye hadn't risen over the distant hills yet, and the world was still bathed in shadow. It was way too early to be waking, but he smiled because it was the first perfect time of day to sneak out on an adventure. So I'll stop right there in that section.
I like that you really do get a sense of the world, and without a bunch of exposition, you instantly understand as the reader, oh, they're in a mall, their names are from the mall stores, that this is, they don't see them as stores anymore. They're part of an ancient culture and just moved forward. I love that.
Okay, I'll read the next section here. This is a further time later on when Johnny and his tribe are out of the mall and they are moving around and having adventures. Johnny and Starbucks ran to the building, swords drawn. When they were inside, they hurried to the broken, rotted stairway to the second floor. As they reached the door leading to the open floor where the tiger beastie stood, they slowed to a crawl. Johnny heard its loud, eager pants first. Carefully, he slipped around the corner and he saw it. It lay on an edge, paws dangling over. Its eyes were transfixed on the tribe below, looking at one after another, picking out a likely victim. Johnny made sure to position himself so that the tiger beastie had a way to escape. The last thing he wanted to do was corner it, for he knew it would have no option but attack him then. Starbucks seemed to sense this too, for he moved to a spot, leaving the tiger beastie a way out. It started rising. Johnny knew it was about to strike. He readied his sword and nodded at Starbucks. "Hey, furball! Mangy cat beastie, over here!" Starbucks yelled, waving his arms. The tiger beastie turned around and saw Starbucks and Johnny. It crouched, ears pinned back, and snarled, showing sharp, pointed fangs. It tensed, ready to leap on him. Johnny gritted his teeth and rushed the tiger beastie. He yelled and thrust his sword out, stabbing the tiger beastie in the side. The tiger beastie howled and spun in midair, clawing at the sword and snarling. Johnny yelled and stabbed again. Starbucks yelled too, louder. Caught between the two of them, the tiger beastie crawled backwards and swiped at Johnny with its paw, claws extended. Johnny hoped desperately that it would run instead of attack. He continued thrusting his sword forward, pushing the tiger beastie back. Johnny looked over the ledge. Most of the tribe had passed. Now all he had to worry about was him and Starbucks getting away with their skin intact. "Back away, let it go," Johnny began, following his own advice, hoping Starbucks would do the same. The tiger beastie shifted its gaze from one of them to the other and back again, a silent snarl frozen on its face. Its tail twitched swiftly. Even thin and haggard, it was a beautiful animal. Johnny couldn't help but feel admiration and wonder for it, and a quiet joy at being so close to it, even if it meant his death. Ever so slowly, the tiger beastie began backing away. Johnny let go a silent sigh of relief. The last of the tribe was down the street. A few more seconds and they could back away, leaving the tiger beastie alone to look for other prey. "The tribe's gone, Johnny. Let's get out of here." Johnny nodded, enthusiastically agreeing. Slowly, the two backed up, leaving the tiger beastie staring at them with lidded eyes full of menace.
So, Mark, Johnny is not the only thing you do.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, you are an eclectic writer. One would think someone who is this passionate about a character and a world, and that it's open-ended, you're like, no, Johnny's going to have a million more adventures. I have no end game in sight. But actually, this is not the only genre that you write in, and this is certainly not the only series. Will you tell us about your other work?
Okay. I have a horror anthology called Midnight Terrors, which is a collection of short horror stories and dark poems, kind of a Halloween type collection, like Stephen King type or Edgar Allan Poe type stories. And I also have another romantic thriller called Dead by Midnight, which is set in 1950s Texas, and it's about a cowboy and his adventures with his brothers, a murder mystery with a romance thrown in.
Yeah.
And I also have 3 children's picture books. One called Moogie and the Peachtree Dragon, which is about a boy and his adventures trying to get a magical peach tree from a big green dragon. Another one called Peter and the Screaming Monster, which is about a boy, and on his birthday he gets to go to the amusement park and all the fun he has and how he overcomes his fear of the screaming monster, the big roller coaster, and when he does, he finds out how much fun it is. And my latest children's picture book is called Take a Monster to School Day. It's kind of a funny, really funny story about a young girl and all her friends who get to bring their favorite monsters to school one day. and all the chaos and fun and hilarity that happens when the monsters take over the school. So it's just a funny children's picture book. So those are my books so far.
Love that. It's eclectic. I like that. Do we have any questions for Mark? Yes.
I have a question. One of the things that I love in the Johnny Apocalypse books is the way that you use language. And that's kind of one of the things that I love about sci-fi is when sci-fi will go, okay, so I know how people speak right now. In 100 years, what are the things that will change? And I was just curious, like, where did you find inspiration in other sci-fi, you know, for the different, like, slang that you use and them calling things like beastie or beasties and, you know, not really understanding, like, we're going to call this person Starbucks rather than Starbucks is a store.
Right.
So will you talk about that?
Sure. I guess some of it is probably from just more from some of my own reading and stories, but part of it is just me thinking about what it would be like after 100 years that nothing from the old world is still around. They've gone through generation and generation where they don't read, they don't know what happened before, so they've kind of developed their own totally own culture that has nothing to do with all the stuff that's laying around. That most of it is already rotted or destroyed, so they really have no way of knowing about the past or anything, except for Mr. Wizard, who happens to have his father and grandfather intentionally passed on to him some of the knowledge of the past. But for most of the people in the tribe, they're just living day to day as kind of like back in the Middle Ages, really, with no technology, no electricity, nothing. And the names for the where they got were actually in the book. It talks about how Mr. Wizard is one of the people, is the person who helps delivers all the wrigglers, all the babies, and so he kind of gets to pick the names. He helps them pick the names, and he picks names from the different places around them, trying to encourage them to read and to understand around them as well, and also just for fun, he picks the names. And so that's where they get the names from their stores around them, and the things that are familiar to them that they can see around them. So that's kind of the way they kind of, and because they know nothing about anything else, it's all pretty much, you know, just superstition and what's taught to them from their ancestors.
So incredibly alien and also very intense if you stop and think about suddenly a civilization that had to literally focus on survival, the skills that would be lost, you know, if we have no internet, no connectedness, no reading, electricity. Imagine the changes that would happen instantly, that would happen overnight if suddenly you couldn't just go to the store and get food. So to me, what I love is how incredibly realistic that is, in that so much would be lost because it's just not necessary for the species to survive. Emotionally reading, I feel it might be necessary for the species to survive, but at first it's just going to be, so much is going to be stripped away. And I'm sorry, you said you had other questions.
Oh, my other question is, Mark, if you could put Johnny and his gang in anywhere, any setting, what would it be?
Well, like your dream setting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, each city would have its own unique, fun environment. I think maybe going to like maybe Las Vegas or maybe Los Angeles or someplace where things are really strange and different. Those would be kind of neat cities. Maybe Chicago, you know, coming to Chicago and seeing all this stuff that's still left over from, you know, that hasn't been destroyed. Those would be kind of fun places to go.
Cool.
Eventually, if you keep reading the stories, eventually maybe Johnny will even go across the sea or down to Mexico or who knows where, you know, and explore other countries and other places and see how they developed or changed. So.
I can imagine a Johnny adventure on one of those giant shipping boats. It could be a whole book just crossing the sea.
Right,
oh my
yeah.
gracious.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of krakens await?
Right.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. And you guys can find Johnny Apocalypse And The Nuclear Wasteland, that is book 1 at King's Bookstore in Tacoma, Washington. But you can also go directly to Mark's website, which, Mark, what is your URL?
It is www.markrobijn.com.
How easy is that? MarkRobijn.com. And you can reach out to Mark directly right through there. We always say, don't put authors up on pedestals. They are human beings just like you, and they love to hear from you. They love to hear your reviews, your ideas, and reach out. Thank you again, Mark. And
Thank you.
find Johnny Apocalypse today.